Bismillah wa salatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. Continuing the poem known as Atyab al-Nagham, which translates as, the purest melody, or the sweetest melody, of Shah Waliullah rahimahullah, within which he talks about different aspects of nubuwah, of the prophethood of our Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we were in the fifth chapter or fourth chapter, and in this chapter he was discussing the Prophet ﷺ being sent to all of mankind, and that at the time when he was sent, the different types of people that were astray in different ways, from the Persians to the Romans to the Arabs to the Christians to the Jews, and that he brought then the Sharia of Allah Azza wa Jal to join all people, to guide all people. And he told of the wahi and the world of the unseen. And so we were in the middle of this chapter, so we'll just continue from where we stopped. So the poet says that وَأَخْبَرَ عَنْ بَدْءِ السَّمَاءِ لَهُمْ وَعَنْ مَقَامٍ مَخُوفٍ بَيْنَ أَيْدِ الْمُحَاسِبِ. That Rasulullah ﷺ had informed the people about the creation of this sky. And this is something that people still want to study, still want to know. When did the universe start? How did it start? Rasulullah ﷺ told us by bringing the Quran to us, by speaking about it in different ahadith, that how Allah Azza wa Jal created the skies, how Allah Azza wa Jal himself in the Quran in Surah Al-Kahf says that you did not witness the creation of the skies, nor did you even witness the creation of yourself, meaning you don't know much. You don't know much. So Rasulullah ﷺ, for him to come and tell us then how all of this started, how Allah Azza wa Jal created, this is great knowledge, right? This is great knowledge. And for him to tell then about something even more part of the unseen, which is when people will stand in a fearful stance and a fearful place in front of who will take account of them, in front of the Lord. وعن حكم رب العرش فيما يعنهم وعن حكم تروى بحكم التجارب. And that Rasulullah ﷺ informed the people of the order of the Lord of the throne. What is the Sharia? What is the hukm? What is the order of Allah Azza wa Jal? No one has access to the commandments of Allah Azza wa Jal directly. Only the Anbiya have access to this, and that is by the permission of Allah Azza wa Jal. So that which concerns the people from the commandments of Allah. And besides that, hikam, wisdoms which are narrated as per the level of experience. What does that mean? Rasulullah ﷺ, there's two types of knowledge you can kind of describe that he gives to us. One is ilmul ahkam, which is the rulings of the Sharia, which are taken from Quran and Hadith. Right? And then besides that, in Quran and Hadith as well, there are rulings related to how to sleep, how to eat, akhlaq, characteristics. What does it mean to be generous? What does it mean to be kind? What does it mean to be forgiving? Now, some of this, we can reach knowledge of this and understand and learn about this without revelation. We don't need necessarily revelation. But the fact that Rasulullah ﷺ taught us about this and informed us of this also through revelation, it tells us that the knowledge that he brings to us is very concrete, it's definitive, there's no doubt in it. So me and you, we may doubt over what does it mean for a person to be generous. How is a person generous? For you, one type of person may be generous, for me, maybe not. But Rasulullah ﷺ brings yani understandings of these akhlaq and examples of these things which people wouldn't differ over, and you cannot differ over. So Rasulullah ﷺ tells us of even akhlaq in these aspects from wahi. وأبطل أصناف الخنا وأبادها وأصناف بغين للعقوبة جالبي. And he nullified, Rasulullah ﷺ nullified and destroyed all various kinds of things which are things which are uh, you know uh, against aql and against naql. Against aql meaning against people's not against people's rationale, and against naql being against wahi. As it was mentioned last week, examples from the poem as well of the Arabs and the superstitions they had with different types of camels. That certain camels they would not ever slaughter them because they would believe that they have to free it because of their deities and their idols. So Rasulullah ﷺ nullified all of these strange actions. وَأَصْنَافَ بَغْيٍ لِلْعُقُوبَةِ جَالِبِ. And he protected us from all of these different types of wrongdoings that we can do that would bring punishment to us. وَبَشَّرَ مَنْ أَعْطَى الرَّسُولَ قِيَادَهُ بِجَنَّةِ تَنْعِيمٍ وَحُورٍ كَوَاعِبٍ. And he gave the glad tidings of paradise full of bounties and the hur to whoever submits themselves to the Messenger of Allah ﷺ. If you submit yourself to obedience of Rasulullah ﷺ, you submit yourself to Rasulullah ﷺ, then you will be granted all of these blessings. وأوعد من يأبى عبادة ربه عقوبة نيران وعيشة قاطبين. And he warned of a furious punishment. He warned of the punishment of the fire and a wretched life for whoever refuses to worship Allah. And this points to the ayah, وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا. That whoever turns away from my remembrance, Allah Azza wa Jalla says, whoever turns away from my remembrance, فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا. He will have a wretched life, a very difficult life. وَنَحْشُرُهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ أَعْمَى. And we will resurrect such a person to be blind. And that person will then ask, رَبِّ لِمَ حَشَرْتَنِي أَعْمَى وَقَدْ كُنْتُ بَصِيرًا. My Lord, why did you resurrect me to be blind? When I was a person of vision, I used to be able to see. قَالَ كَذَلِكَ أَتَتْكَ آيَاتُنَا. Allah Azza wa Jalla responds saying that it was like this that our signs came to you. You could have seen our signs, but you didn't want to see our signs. فَنَسِيتَهَا. So you forgot our signs. وَكَذَلِكَ الْيَوْمَ تُنْسَى. And likely today you will also be forgotten. Then now the poet says, فَأَنْجَى بِهِ مَنْ شَاءَ مِنَّا نَجَاتَهُ وَمَنْ خَابَ فَلْتَنْدُبْهُ شَرُّ النَّوَادِبِ. And he protected and saved whomsoever Allah Azza wa Jalla wished that such a person be saved. Right? Whomsoever Allah Azza wa Jalla wishes that such a person be saved, Rasulullah ﷺ saved all of those people. وَمَنْ خَابَ فَلْتَنْدُبْهُ شَرُّ النَّوَادِبِ. And whoever failed, the mourners can cry over such a person. In other words, فَلْتَبْكِهِ الْبَوَاكِ, as the Arab also say. That the mourners, in the Arab tradition at that time, there would be women that were paid to mourn a person when they died, to show that such a person was honorable. This is why, still till today, you cannot recognize a person's, virtue just by how many people are crying when they die. So then he says, فَأَشْهَدُ أَنَّ اللَّهَ أَرْسَلَ عَبْدَهُ بِحَقٍّ وَلَا شَيْءَ هُنَاكَ بِرَائِبٍ. He's closing now this chapter, and he says that I bear witness that verily Allah sent His messenger with the truth, and there's nothing doubtful therein. وَلَا شَيْءَ هُنَاكَ بِرَائِبِ. There is nothing that could cast doubt. وَقَدْ كَانَ نُورَ اللَّهِ فِينَا لِمُهْتَدٍ وَصَمْصَامَ تَدْمِيرٍ عَلَى كُلِّ نَاكِبِ. And Rasulullah ﷺ was a light of Allah amongst us for whosoever seeks guidance. Such a person would be able to seek guidance from the light of Rasulullah ﷺ. And he was also a sharp sword. He was also a sharp sword. Remember, Rasulullah ﷺ is nur for the people that want to take guidance. But what about the people that don't want to take guidance? For such people, he is, samsama tadmir, as this poet says, that he's a sharp sword of devastation for anyone who turns away. So if you follow him, you'll be successful. If you don't follow him, you will face failure. The next chapter, now we're moving to the next chapter. And in this chapter, the poet dives into other characteristics of the evidences of prophethood. Last week as well, evidences of prophethood. The week before as well, evidences of prophethood. What does that mean? What that means is that the acknowledgement of the prophethood of Rasulullah ﷺ is not from just one source of evidence, from various sources of evidence. And this is the miraculous nature of the prophethood of our Rasul ﷺ, that other prophets maybe were sent with one miracle, were sent with a few miracles maybe. Right? But there is no prophet except our prophet that every single aspect of him is miraculous. Every single aspect of him points to prophethood, that this person cannot be a normal person. This person could only be a prophet. So in this chapter, he talks a little bit more about character traits, see the akhlaq of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he gives example in his commentary in the beginning that when you study certain, he gives examples of the ulama and the kutub, but when you study, for example, nahu, grammar, if you study the kitab of Sibawayh, then you'd be convinced that this person has expert grammar. Right? If you study poetry and you read the poems of Mutanabbi, you'll know that this person is a great poet. If you study, at that time, the ancient medicine and the books of the book of Al-Qanun, for example, of Ibn Sina, then you'd know that this person is a master physician. Likewise, when you study the law, the sharia of Rasulullah ﷺ, when you study the law, the sharia of Rasulullah ﷺ, and you study the objectives behind the sharia that he brought, then you'd understand that this person could only be a prophet because this law could only be divinely inspired. And this law cannot be decided by any normal human being and their intellect. As some of the ulama mention, that when it comes to believing in Allah, believing in Allah is part of the fitrah, it's part of the nature of a human being. Now the ulama also say, that believing in the sunnah of Rasulullah ﷺ, because the sunnah that he brought is so connected to fitrah, so connected to the innate good nature, good qualities of a human being, that even accepting the sunnah for any person is in line with rationale. It's not opposing of our logic. It doesn't oppose our fitrah, our nature, which is why it's so easy to accept the sunnah, right? Because it's a part of human nature. So he says, وَأَقْوَى دَلِيلٍ عِنْدَ مَنْ تَمَّ عَقْلُهُ عَلَى أَنَّ شِرْبَ الشَّرْعِ أَصْفَ الشَّارِبِ, that the strongest dalil, the strongest evidence for any person whose aql is complete, meaning a person who does have logic and rationale, is that the sharia is so easily absorbed, it's so easily understood, it's so easily applied. تواطي عقول في سلامة فكرة على كل من يأتي به من مطالب, that so many minds, intellectual minds, with those that have no sort of impairment in their logic and their understanding and their rationale, so many of these minds, century after century, study and understand the Sharia and everything that it brings from the purposes of the Sharia, the objectives of the Sharia, and what happens when you study the Sharia with such detail, you recognize that سماحة شرع في رزانة شرعة وتحقيق حق في إشارة حاجب, that this is a, you know, beautiful Sharia, which is, it's not too difficult, but it's not too easy as well, right? Rasulullah says, "Bu'ithtu bil millat as-samhat as-sahla," that I was sent with a welcoming Sharia, a welcoming type of way, meaning that people can accept it easily and they can practice it easily. In that the Sharia is never too difficult, nor is it ever too easy. Because if the Sharia is too easy, then what's going to happen? There's no, you can do whatever you want then. And that's what's happened to some, religions and some ways in the way they practice, that you can do whatever you want and everything is fine. Then why do you need a Sharia then? If your goal is to make everything possible for yourself and not to have any boundaries for yourself, then why do you need a Sharia? Right? For example, if your goal is that you don't want to follow the plan that your doctor gives you, you don't want to follow a dietary plan, you don't want to follow a plan of exercise, then don't plan these things to begin with, right? So the same thing with our approach to Sharia. It's important that yes, there is a necessity sometimes to take ease. Rasulullah ﷺ tells us about this aspect, idea of rukhsa, permissions to practice something easier when we're in a more distressed or difficult situation. But if your goal is that every single time I'm going to try to do what's easier for my nafs, what's easier for myself, and every single time I'm going to find what is the rukhsa, then you should be afraid that you might be just following your desires and not following the Sharia. Right? So Rasulullah ﷺ was sent with a perfect Sharia that is not too easy, not too difficult, and it very elegantly establishes what is the truth. وَمَكَارِمِ أَخْلَاقٍ وَإِتْمَامُ نِعْمَةٍ نُبُوَّةُ تَأْلِيفٍ وَسُلْطَانُ غَالِبٍ. And Rasulullah ﷺ was part of these miracles that he was granted, by which he was able to establish his nubuwah, his prophethood, was his character, the beautiful kind of traits of his character. This is such an important part. The Prophet ﷺ's character is such an important mu'jiza, miracle, from the miracles that he was given. That such a perfect human being, such a perfect person. Nubuwwatu ta'lif, itmam ni'mah. That Allah Azza wa Jal completed the deen for him and granted him a sharia which is complete. Nubuwwatu ta'lif, prophethood, which brings full affection in that it joins the people. The Prophet ﷺ was a means for the people to join each other. People that hated each other ended up loving each other because of Rasulullah ﷺ, what he taught the people. As it comes in hadith, Rasulullah ﷺ said that I was sent with the purpose to complete noble traits. Meaning, Rasulullah ﷺ was sent to teach the human being how to be a complete human being, how to be worthy of being called a human being. What makes a thing worthy, to be called what it should be called? By it fulfilling its objective. If I put a car outside and I tell you this car can't drive, is it worthy of being called a car? Right? A human being that cannot act according to morality, is that human being worthy of being called a human being? In specific, the ulama give examples of when people have the habit of becoming angry, for example. People who can't control their anger. A man who cannot control his anger, the scholars say, what's the difference between that man, that person, and an insane person? That a man is angry, so he starts breaking plates, starts cursing people, saying things which are irrelevant. What's the difference between that person and a child? Right? A child that has no logic, no no responsibility, right? And an insane person, right? So the title of being called an insan, a human being, comes with responsibilities, right? That you have to fulfill those responsibilities. What makes you worthy of being called a human being? Then the last verse before going to the next chapter, he says, نُصَدِّقُ دِينَ الْمُصْطَفَى بِقُلُوبِنَا عَلَى بَيِّنَاتٍ فَهْمُهَا مِنْ غَرَائِبِ. That we testify the religion of the chosen one with our hearts, the sincerity of our hearts. Right? We believe in Rasulullah's ways from the depth of our hearts. And because of the very manifest and clear evidences which we understand and acknowledge from it. And this points to an ayah in the Quran. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, أَفَمَنْ كَانَ عَلَى بَيِّنَةٍ مِّن رَبِّهِ وَيَتْلُوهُ شَاهِدٌ مِّنْهُ. That is such a person who is on a clear manifest proof and evidence from his Lord, and he's a witness to it and believes in it. Is such a person the same as a person who doesn't understand the evidences? To understand these aspects of the prophethood of Rasulullah ﷺ, which is not just that he split the moon, not just that later on the poet will actually mention the splitting of the moon is a smaller miracle. We'd think the splitting of the moon is a grand miracle, but the splitting of the moon is a smaller miracle in comparison to the Quran. The splitting of the moon is a smaller miracle in comparing to the akhlaq of Rasulullah ﷺ. So that's something very important to understand, that we believe in Rasulullah ﷺ as the Rasul, as the messenger, not only because of certain supernatural, miraculous things that he did, but also because of just him being who he was. He himself, his being, the way he sat down, the way he stood up, the way he talked, it was all miraculous, right? And so moving on to the next chapter, the translator and commentator brings a few kind of beneficial points that he mentions here, which is that what is a mu'jiza, what is a miracle? A miracle is a manifestation of some sort of supernatural action which happens on the hand of someone who's honest, meaning a prophet. So a prophet who is, because there have been, people who claim prophethood, right? Or there have been liars, or there have been magicians that do also certain strange things. Right? Those are not miracles. Those are, come into a different category of things. But Rasulullah ﷺ was granted many, many miracles, right? Many miracles. And, counting them is sometimes, you can't count them because of how many miracles he's been granted. The ahadith mentions so many different types of miracles. And that these miracles were brought down to us through the method of tawatur, which means that, many groups of Sahaba after many groups, hundreds of them, narrated and saw and observed and witnessed these miracles. Right? If, I do something supernatural and one person sees it, and this one person now goes and tells other people, look, he did something supernatural. You may not believe it. You'll think maybe that me and the other person are both delusional. We probably saw something, You're hallucinating. But if, someone, like, if I did something supernatural and all of you witnessed it, you wouldn't doubt it. Right? So Rasulullah ﷺ, these supernatural mu'jizat, these miracles that manifested at his hand, it wasn't only one Sahabi that saw it. It wasn't only two Sahaba that saw it. It was many Sahaba that saw it and saw it over and over again. No rational, logical human being is going to lie over and over again, right? This is the point being, right? That no matter how a person is, if someone sees something over and over again, and they're going to believe in it and they're going to narrate it. And so the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, narrate to us the different mu'jizat of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, one of the beautiful comments that one of the ulama mentions, in a kitab, a book that he writes specifically on the Mu'jizat. He says that Allah Azza wa Jal has said that وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ, that we have not sent you, O Rasulullah except as a mercy to all of mankind. And so this merciful nature, which is a part of Rasulullah's miraculous nature, is apparent to all of mankind, right? And so the idea that he wants to give this author, this scholar, is that all levels of human being are witnesses to the Prophet ﷺ and his miracles. All levels of not only human being, but all levels of creation. The same way we say that the skies and the earth believe in Allah, the skies and the earth believe in Muhammad ﷺ as the messenger. As it comes in a hadith of Bayhaqi, that the exact wording of the hadith is that there isn't a single thing, ما من شيء بين السماء والأرض, there isn't a single thing between the sky and the earth except that it knows Anni Rasulullah, it knows that I am the messenger of Allah. And the narrations are there, various, of Rasulullah says in a narration, authentic narration, that before I became a prophet, there was a rock in Makkah Mukarramah that used to give salam to me. And verily, without a doubt, I still know where this rock is right now. Right? And there are many narrations of trees and rocks and all these things that don't even have life, we would say. And they acknowledge the Prophet ﷺ and his being, right? So, all levels of creation. And the author, or this other scholar goes into kind of defining what is creation. Right? So he says, the creation can be, the alam, the world, can be divided into two types. Alamul ma'ani, right? Alamul ma'ani and alamul a'yan. Alamul ma'ani are abstract concepts. Right? So abstract concepts are things that can be, mentally understood, but not necessarily have a physical existence. Alamul a'yan are those things in the world that have a physical existence. Now, from the alamul a'yan, those things which have a physical existence, you have those which are considered those that have aql and those that don't have aql. Those that have aql, right, are the human beings, angels and jinn. Those that do not have aql are of two types. Those that are higher beings and those that are lower beings. The higher beings are those above the skies, so stars and other planets. Those are beings that exist but do not have an intellect. And then you have the lower category, which is those beneath the earth. Those beneath the earth are of two types. Those that are, basa'it, these are terminologies that the philosophers have coined. Those that are basa'it are those that are simple, like the four elements, for example, water and fire and earth and things that other things are, made from, right? And then, you have those that are murakkabat, those that are assembled, right? Assembled from various parts, such as, plants and other, jamadat, like this table, or, other things. So the author goes kind of explaining the entire existence, right? This is the entire existence right here. So all of the, of course, created existence. So this is all of the existence. So the author says, all of these things acknowledge the prophethood of Rasulullah. All of them, from the beginning to the end of them. So he says, Barahinu haqqin awdahat sidqa qawlihi rawaha wa yarwi kullu shibbin wa sha'ibi. That there are evidences of truth that have clarified the honesty of the speaker. Meaning that, why and how do we believe that Rasulullah is a messenger? The ulama of Aqidah have created a logical system to this, right? So Rasulullah is honest, or everything he says is the truth. Why? Because he's honest. How do we know he's honest? Because the manifestation of miraculous things on his hands, right? So Rasulullah is honest claims that he has knowledge of the unseen given from Allah. What proves that he has access to the unseen? That he is able to do things which are unseen, which are supernatural, right? So this is the process of how people be. Mu'jiza leads people to the honesty of Rasulullah ﷺ, and the honesty of Rasulullah ﷺ leads them to believe in his message, right? So, now me and you, we didn't witness those miracles. So why should we believe? Why should we believe if we didn't witness those miracles? We didn't see Rasulullah ﷺ. Right? Knowledge comes down, or knowledge is transferred to people in various ways. One is to witness that, to witness something with your own eyes. But there's another type of knowledge which is not that you witness something with your eyes, right? So for example, we all know that Fiji is a country that exists. Maybe we haven't visited Fiji. Maybe you haven't even seen it on the map. But everyone knows it exists. Everyone talks about it. Everyone says it. And if you look at the map, it's there as well. But what's on the map is not Fiji. Fiji is a place in the world. You haven't gone there. How do you know it exists, right? The point being, you don't need to see everything or hear everything or taste anything just for it to be a source of knowledge, right? So the poet says, "Rawaha wa yarwi kullu shibin shaibi," that these miracles have been narrated by every young and old man from the time of Rasulullah ﷺ. That narration holds value, precedent. That maybe you didn't see it, but you can. This also, by the way, explains to us the importance of connecting with the Quran, because the only one miracle that remains and remain is the Quran. Right? If you were to say that really kind of remains, but how are you going to access the Quran, right, if we don't study it? Right? Why is the Quran a miracle for the Sahaba? Because they knew Arabic, right? So that's something important to think about. من الغيب كم أعطى الطعام لجائع وكم مرة أسقى الشراب لشارب. How many times from the unseen Rasulullah ﷺ fed people, as it comes in different ahadith many times, that Rasulullah ﷺ had a bowl of milk, and that bowl of milk was sufficient for an entire army of people, right? Or how many times that he gave water to people, as it comes in hadith. Once that Rasulullah ﷺ, there was a vessel, a container, which was empty, didn't have water, and then Rasulullah ﷺ filled it with his hand. Authentic hadith. Filled it with his hand, and the water flowed from his finger, right? Until that container filled with water, and the entire army of Sahaba drank from it, right? And that entire army of Sahaba now narrates that hadith, right? وكم من مريض قد شفاه دعاؤه وإن كان قد أشفى لوجوة واجبي. How many ill people Rasulullah ﷺ had cured even though they were on the brinks of death? And many narrations of this as well. Many narrations of Sahaba who perhaps were not on the brinks of death, but for example Ali radiallahu and others who were harmed in battle. And for example, one of the Sahaba had was armed, was harmed, his eye was harmed, and he could no longer see. Rasulullah ﷺ put his hand on the eye of that person, and then that person's eye was cured. And the Sahabi says that I could see better after Rasulullah ﷺ cured my eye than before. Meaning, Rasulullah ﷺ's cure made my eye better than it was before. وَدَرَّتْ لَهُ شَاةٌ لَدَى أُمِّ مَعْبَدٍ حَلِيبًا وَلَا تُسْتَطَاعُ حَلْبَةَ حَالِبِ. And he mentions now the author, who's a muhaddith, he mentions that now remember when the goat of Ma'bad radiallahu anha, Rasulullah ﷺ was traveling in the hijrah with Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and they stopped at the home of Ma'bad. And Ma'bad radiallahu anha, this beautiful hadith where she talks about the description of Rasulullah ﷺ and how that happened, very lengthy hadith, known as Hadith Ma'bad. But Rasulullah ﷺ asked if he could milk one of the goats. She said that this goat cannot give milk. This goat would not be able to give milk. Rasulullah ﷺ said, can you just give me permission to try? So Rasulullah ﷺ went and he said, Bismillah. And then he milked the goat, and the goat gave milk. Right? And then he filled one bowl and he gave it to Ma'bad radiallahu anha first. She drank. Then he filled again. Abu Bakr drank. Then he filled again and he drank last. And then he filled it again and left the milk with Ma'bad radiallahu anha. Or for example, وَقَدْ سَاخَ فِي أَرْضٍ حَصَانُ سُرَاقَةَ وَفِيهِ حَدِيثٌ عَنْ بَرَاءِ ibn عَازِبِ. When Rasulullah ﷺ was in the hijrah as well, and after he left the house of Ma'bad radiallahu anha, that a person by the name Suraqa ibn Malik, who was following the Prophet ﷺ. Why? Because there was a bounty that who could ever bring Rasulullah ﷺ and Abu Bakr back, they would be given this and this much wealth. When he was coming close to Rasulullah ﷺ, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu said, Utina ya Rasulullah, we've been followed. Rasulullah ﷺ says, don't worry, la tahzan. So then when Suraqa comes close, the feet of his animal, the feet of his horse sink into the ground. Right? And continuously keep sinking and keep sinking. Right? And so then Suraqa himself says, you've been given aid from the unseen. Let me go and I'll tell the people to leave you alone. Right? You've been given aid from the unseen. And the poet then continues and he says, وَقَدْ فَاحَ طِيبًا كَفُّ مَنْ مَسَّ كَفُّهُ وَمَا حَلَّ رَأْسًا جَسَّ شَيْبُ الذَّوَائِبِ. That any hand that touched the hand of Rasulullah ﷺ, right? If you held the hand of Rasulullah ﷺ, when you let go, you'd smell fragrance from your hand. Right? Rasulullah ﷺ's hand had a fragrance. If you touched his hand, that fragrance would come onto your hand, and it would remain. It would remain. And Rasulullah ﷺ, whomsoever he touched the hair of his head, that hair would not turn white. There's many hadith of that as well. For this chapter, there's quite a few remaining, so we'll pause for now, inshallah, and we'll continue this chapter in the coming week. But the importance of these miracles is that there are various types of miracles, right? Various types of miracles. Some miracles are like this, that water coming from the hand of Rasulullah ﷺ, Rasulullah ﷺ curing people, right? And some miracles are a bit more subtle. For example, the Quran. How do you know if the Quran is a miracle? How are you going to know if the Quran is a miracle? There are many miraculous aspects of the Quran. But to know that, you have to study, right? Because the Quran is a book. And a book has to be read. A book has to be studied. So to know the miraculousness of the Quran now, you have to give your life to studying the Quran, right? And that's the greatest miracle of Rasulullah ﷺ. It's the miracle that we still have today, right? Which is right in front of us. Of course, the other miracles we have still in hadith, and they're narrated to us. But the Quran is right in front of you for you to access, just like it was at the time of Rasulullah ﷺ. May Allah grant us understanding of these aspects of the prophethood of Rasulullah ﷺ and the ability to appreciate him and follow his sunnah. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun.